Oh. Like, what do you find that?
You must go first. I'll take the
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Carlos Weimer. I'm an employee here at the New York Times. I work with Diversity in Digital, which is sponsoring this event in conjunction with CITE NYT, which is an employee resource group here at the Times, as well as our partners from Talent and Inclusion, and in conjunction with CITE Caribbean Tech and Entrepreneurship. Just wanted to come up here and say thank you for coming to this event. It's a very interesting topic. We know very well the kinds of changes that are going in the world of journalism, so it's important to us to try to understand how is technology actually impacting how we do journalism. And here at the Times, we are doing some of the most cutting-edge work in the field of journalism, so it's definitely something that is of interest to us. So we're very glad that you're here to share this conversation on this important topic. So before we jump, we're going to just give a few words about some of the opportunities we have here at the Times, in case anybody is interested. So I'm going to welcome Austin Lane to talk a little bit about that.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Hopefully it's a great event tonight. My name is Austin. I work on our talent and acquisition team. So I handle a lot of our technology recruiting. I have my partners in the back here, Jason and Sindhu as well. So if you guys are interested in any like the opportunities at the New York Times, we're doing a ton of hiring right now, and feel free to find one of us after the event, and we'll be more than happy to give you some information on the open roles and kind of what we're doing here. So just wanted to introduce myself, enjoy the event, and thanks for coming.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgie, the founder of CITE Collective, which stands for Caribbeans in Tech and Entrepreneurship. We've been having meetups and networking events since about 2014, and the whole purpose of this group is to serve as a collective, a business collective of entrepreneurs and techies that identify with the Caribbean diaspora. So on our panel, we have members such as Jamie and Kerry-Ann from Kerry-Ann Friends, and we just really want to show that there's a lot going on in the Caribbean, as well as those of us that are from the Caribbean here in the United States. You can definitely check us out at CITE Collective, CITEcollective.com, and Jamie will definitely talk a little bit more about that, and I'll hand over the mic to him to get the panel started. And thank you so much for everyone being here tonight.
Hi, everyone. Georgie forgot to do something. Get that up. Oh, yeah, shit, hold it up. Be proud of it. If you don't come in and first,
Thank you.
So, how's everyone doing tonight? Good. So, pretty much, this panel came along because things have changed in the past few years. And especially when it comes to technology, especially with how we actually take in news, news now is coming from the podcast. It's coming internationally. It's coming mostly on our phones. And so the change has come. But let me ask you, Richard, what was it like 5 years ago from what you could?
Yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Richard Pinales. I work here at the time. How to 5 years ago, it was not too different than it is right now. The details are about sort of the speed at which journalism has changed. 5 years ago, we were dealing with primarily sort of our platforms being the destination and the intrusion of Facebook and Google with their products, and sort of trying to understand from a business perspective, like what does that mean? And since then, we've tried it, we've done it. Some companies have gone all in on Facebook Instant, on publishing stuff on Twitter, and sort of abandoning your own platform as a destination for the users. How things are different now is that that's not a scalable scenario, right? Like if you don't have your audience with you, you can have great content, but if they're not with you, you're not going to monetize it. And so I think that we still are in the environment where Facebook and Instagram and every social network has your audience sort of captive, but I think companies are starting to realize that they need to sort of bring them back. So from a technology perspective, we're working on things that hopefully give us more insights into how to bring people back and how to sort of put the relevant information in front of the users and sort of engage with them in a one-to-one basis. Cool.
Kerry, the same question for you because you actually have a podcast.
Yeah, so I love what Richard just said because social media is the distraction, and so what brings people to your platform, or how do you get people around the campfire, and that's like a central platform, which is the blog or the podcast, and how do you give them what they want in a crowded space? So what I had to do was really dig into my niche. And so early, I worked full time as a learning and development coordinator at a management consulting company, and I literally borrowed their internal work, and I said, decidedly Caribbean. I decided to dig deeper into the Caribbean niche as opposed to trying to appeal to everyone, because the more I dig into that niche, the more I resonate and connect with the audience, and they come to me because they know that I'm going to talk about their experience, what it is like to be Caribbean American, whether it's going to work and you're warming up your food or all sorts of stuff. Those things connect. So, but you can post things on Twitter or Instagram, but what brings them back, and that's having a hub for them to come to, which is your platform and your own media. So I think what you're saying is just right on when it comes to that.
For me, I would say, what you mentioned about like finding a niche. So finding my niche through the noise was not trying to be a general assignment reporter or kind of catch the news of the day. It was really focusing on the Caribbean region and diaspora, and I made that my thing. And I didn't try to, and I started small. So I started by working for community ethnic media outlets, really building that brand with some of the smaller publications, and then worked my way up to doing bigger assignments within network news. And it was really difficult at first because it was like Caribbean news, typically you only really care about the region when it was like weather related or crime related, and that was something I always took issue with. But once I started to really build my audience around just that focus on the diaspora, making sure that I was not only present in terms of my bylines, but present in the community at events, utilizing my hashtags online, and really just seeking out people who, whether they had the podcast or they were in charge of different groups or associations, those kinds of things, I was able to build that brand that way, and that's how I've been able to kind of find that niche through noise and keep it growing.
How long did it take you?
It took me about a good 3 years in terms of making the switch from, just doing my general assignment reporting and, just trying to catch that story of the day toward building this brand as someone that's known as like a Caribbean voice. So about 3 good years and lots of my money.
And so, I guess the next question would be is, where do you guys see digital technology and journalism running into the next 5 years?
I think a lot more collaboration, for sure. I didn't think, 5 years ago it was, okay, tech is over here, or, people working on photographs and what we're trying to do on our online are here and you're over there. Now, I literally, like today I can be on air, tomorrow I'm the person that's handling social media, as well as doing the Facebook Live, the Periscope Live, what have you, and I'm mixing it all into one day, and collaborating with those teams a lot more frequently, so I see more collaboration, but the one thing that I hope to see less of is just running at what's the next thing, and just kind of really solidifying the things that are working well, because I see if we do that, those things will grow a lot bigger and better.
Gotcha, thank you. So I wanted to get everybody just to kind of get a chance to introduce themselves and what they do, so that people can kind of get a better idea, because even though I know, maybe some of them. So, let's start with you.
Sure. So I'm Richard Pinales, originally from the Dominican Republic. I've been here at the New York Times for close to 6.5 years now. I worked in media my entire career from the technical perspective, so I was just having a conversation about not being a journalist and just been sitting here, so it's a little weird. But I've been lucky enough to work for some pretty big publications. So I have an understanding from the technical perspective, from the data perspective, about what it takes to put out news and the different tools and processes that exist to get things done. I started out working for the Wall Street Journal, worked my way through Condé Nast, several of the publications there, and then landed here with some friends to work on data. So our primary focus right now is building teams and just working on sort of data products that enable the business to essentially put out this great story that we put out in these times. Cool.
I'm Melissa Noel. I'm a multimedia journalist, and I contribute to outlets such as NBC News Digital, Kerry-Ann magazine, and I'm an on-air correspondent for Caribbean television. So I kind of get to mix it up in my role, which is what I really love about what I get to do, because honestly I get bored. So I like that I have that flexibility, but I come from a networking background. I started actually in radio in Washington, D.C., and then when I came back to New York, I started on the assignment desk at ABC News, so I came from a production background as a producer, and then worked my way into reporting, and along the way, went to graduate school, did that whole thing, but I always felt like it was something missing for me, or from what I was doing, and I found that it was missing because I needed to be the person that was telling the stories that I wasn't seeing happening in my newsroom, and that's why I decided to become an independent reporter and learn how to, get contracts and focus on the region, Caribbean region as I do now.
Cool.
I'm Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown, and I'm a podcaster with Kerry-Ann Friends. I started out in legal. I was in legal technology, so I was doing a lot of e-discovery and doing a lot of litigation support. And I started Kerry-Ann Friends because I was going through something at work, and it was almost like, culturally, I'm heads down, I do my work, and, people are saying that I was mean, and it didn't resonate, and I realized that there was this cultural way that how I was brought up and how to operate at work that didn't jive with how the American workplace was. And I found out that a lot of people have that experience. I grew up here, my mom says, go to work, don't get in no trouble, don't talk to nobody, don't get into this. And you do that, and you go to work, and then when you find out that that's also to your detriment because you can't succeed that way, it's like, how do you pivot how many years of being taught that to be successful at work? And so I started Kerry-Ann Friends, and when I started it, blogging was one of those things where people are like, oh, your topic doesn't apply. It applies to everyone, and you have blogging gurus tell you, oh, broaden your audience, and then feeling that emptiness, like, no, this doesn't work. And so really doing the podcast, speaking directly to the Caribbean audience, you're going to hear patois, you're going to hear things specific to the audience, to the region, when you listen to the show, and talking about current events the way that doesn't get reflected in the main media. So it's an outlet for people to find them, not be represented. Cool.
And I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Jimenez. I actually started off with, I think I go back a little bit. After I got my MBA, I realized I did not like my job. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I have a project for you to work. I ended up doing a web series, and then from there I ended up doing a short film, or as production. Then I worked for a television network doing digital project management, and then I fell in love with project management itself. Currently I'm a project manager now, so if anybody ever wants to talk to me about it, ask me. People are like, what does that mean? I'm like, why are you projects? Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah. If I ever go into the details, people usually end up walking away. Oh, so yeah, so it's kind of important to kind of understand where, kind of like where we are, and kind of more so kind of figure out, where journalism is going. Especially in today's society, in today's administration, people are like, journalism is this, journalism is that, and it's very accusatory, and it feels like it's a shootout. And I don't know who's actually winning or losing in this scenario. I really don't, because I'm just a spectator in this game. Well, how do you feel journalism is for you guys within this past 2 years?
I would say that for the first time, I never really knew what to expect. Like sometimes maybe there's a protocol, you expect certain things to happen or not happen, but every day felt like a football, especially with the first year of the new administration. I think it really challenged a lot of journalists to, I think before this line of objectivity was really, you cannot, you're a journalist, you have to be objective, you can't really, give your opinion, you can't do this. A lot of that went out the window. And I would say in a good way, because to me, there has to be a line between, being objective and, but not really speaking up when you see things that are not right, period. And I think for me personally, it made me not afraid to sometimes give more my opinion on certain things and be able to just kind of push back a little bit more. But what I also saw that disappointed me a bit was I had seen the sense of camaraderie amongst journalists as a whole when it came to handling certain situations. We started to see that. We've been seeing that more and more, but I wish it would happen sooner, because it kind of feels like sometimes when that train leaves the station, you can't get it back. And sometimes that's what's it has felt like it has been happening. I think it's pushed journalists to be more de facto about standing around certain issues and having a sense of camaraderie again in the profession, which I think is good. So I hope to see more of that. Yeah.
I think for the last 2 years, so I'm not a journalist that's in the front, facing the users or gathering stories, but I think that from an organizational perspective, there are new dialogues happening. And there is like this lack of clarity in terms of agendas, in terms of sort of how you go about doing your normal work. How do you bring your full self to work as a journalist or technologist and not bring your opinions about the state of things in the country? So I think that, again, I don't know what it is like for you. That was a discussion of what I did like the last 2 years. I think for me, working on sort of enabling the tools and the different things that can be used to publish our story, what I noticed is that we are, a lot more detailed about data. We're a lot more detailed about making sure that we have it right. We're a lot more detailed about sort of putting the right resources behind the video stories or whatever the biggest thing that's going on right now. And then being really fast about reacting to what's going on in real time. So it kind of comes back to the data side of things, but it's more about adapting your business to be in this sort of free-form conversation without losing the fact that you are one of these institutions that has a vision, a particular opinion about how you share the news. But again, from a technical perspective, it's just brought about some really interesting challenges. I don't know how many of you here are in a technical area, but What about the age of real sort of big data and like real-time data and the importance of understanding and making sense of that? And so, so I see it as a good sign, even though for the rest of the journalists, it might not be a good sign.
Show hands, what would you work on the technical side or in digital?
Oh.
You are not alone. That's why you're sitting up here.
Cool. That makes sense.
That all makes sense.
So to that point you made, I think, in terms of like real-time response to things that were going on, it made everyone, whether you on the tech side or you're on the reporting side, to be really fast about fact-checking right away, making sure you got those statistics, getting those statistics up there, ensuring that your news outlet was getting it right the first time, or challenging the fact that you were being called, fake news, meaning that you had to get the facts out there a lot quicker. So it challenged us a lot more to be on our toes and to work, to collaborate with the tech side to make sure that, the data for your story was like on point and together really quickly. So I think that was a positive.
So on my end, I'm a little bit a hybrid of both. So I think of where people come and react to what they've seen in the news. So the data supports, when I started out with Kerry-Ann, it was more tech and career focused, and we still do a lot of that because of my background. But the data showed that people responded to the life stories about their experience. So there are so many other platforms that are talking about entrepreneurship and how to make it. My platform specifically is talking about the experience. So what happens when, like the other day, we were having a conversation about 21 Savage, those immigrant thing, identifying as being Atlanta. And we're like, as immigrants, we understand why he's like, I'm from Atlanta, because we're in this room, and if you say, Kerry-Ann, where are you from? I'm gonna be like, Brooklyn. If I'm in Brooklyn and I'm having a conversation with someone else, depending on the person, I can say I'm from the Caribbean. If I'm talking to someone from the Caribbean, I'm Jamaican. And if I go to our DC office, I'm from New York. And all of those, I'm all of them. If I go to the Midwest to visit my parents, I'm from Milwaukee, you go Bucks. So we're all these layers, and when you can't really, you're politically correct in the office, you're mindful, it's who can I look to or speak to or hear that's going to have an idea of where I'm coming from. And which is kind of why on both ends, from a legal standpoint, freedom of speech, and then you have these micro communities on opposite ends that are popping up. And you want more people of color or minority groups who want to have more of those spaces where they can hear their thoughts, how their community is reacting to it, because for the most part, immigration has been the face of Hispanics and Latinos, but there's a really large Black population that are immigrants, and that's not really presented. And the unfortunate thing is Pinales, which is the face of what a Black immigrant looks like, not necessarily, and the fact that they don't all come through the border of Mexico, most immigrants overstay a visa, and that's kind of what happens, and start having those conversations and dialogue around what does that look like, what does that feel like. How many of us who were around kids whose parents weren't here, they didn't have their papers, as we say in the Caribbean, and what that felt like or looked like going to school and picking up report cards, or maybe someone else had to do it or something. So podcasting is the way that we come and kind of talk about how we're reacting to things in the news.
You're saying this, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I remember the time when somebody said my father was an immigrant. I said to them, like, that's from Puerto Rico. And they were like, yeah, he's an immigrant. He's a U.S. citizen. It's a commonwealth of the U.S. And he looks confused. What do you think? It's only 2 months, right? 2 months, a month and a half in 2019. What is the newest, it's right, I know it feels like it's longer. What is the newest trend that you see popping up? Just like, that you think is either going to catch on or just as interesting, or might overstay as well?
I see very recently like a lot more focus on AI from a publishing perspective. Now this is not new, like a lot of companies, everybody on the internet is talking about this the last few years. But now you see bigger companies actually investing in it. So like about that.
AI is artificial intelligence for some folks who don't know. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Cool. So a lot of the companies seem to be like making some more conscious investments in trying to figure out how AI is going to influence the publishing systems or some of the decisions of which stories to put in front of people. And so it's not a new trend per se, but I did see a few articles this past month that included a couple of big companies like Dow Jones and us, sort of thinking through exactly how do we make use of these technologies, how do we make use of this data. So I expect it to be something where maybe now we can start to form a better opinion on how to use recommendations, how to use data to sort of automate what humans are doing. But it remains to be seen kind of what happens there.
I would say what I've been seeing from late last year into this year is more focused on some of the niche categories and newsrooms really focusing on, let's say, the CNN expanding their newsrooms in on the continent, Africa, East Africa, West Africa. More newsrooms expanding their coverage in the Caribbean, Latin America, those kinds of things. And whereas this was 5 years ago, literally me begging an editor to give me a little bit in their budget so I could get to a story in, let's say, Trinidad and Tobago or Barbados or something. And now, you have whole newsrooms dedicated to or bureaus being set up for this kind of coverage. And I'm really happy to see that. But in the digital space, I would say, because, your bigger networks have always had the resources to do that a lot more. But from the digital side of things, I've been seeing more outlets that are expanding that kind of coverage. So that's an exciting thing to see.
So I would like to see more of that, and to New York Times Race Related, that whole newsletter that I get, it's like, that is kind of what I want. Like, I get my alerts every morning from the New York Times, and it's just like, okay, let me run through this, and having Race Related kind of highlight certain things, it's helpful, because you want to, I was just reading this quote, information is just making meaning, and Race Related, getting that newsletter makes meaning because the editor does this intro, and then that's a perspective that you don't get just from scanning through it. So I think that's important to have more curated. Here are all the potential articles or news that New York Times wants to put out. Here is how this applies to this particular audience, or why you should read this. And, that for me, I look forward to that newsletter when I get it. So I'd like to see more of those. And also, of course, obviously from the Caribbean perspective.
Cool. So what's your plan for this year, Kerry-Ann? Like, what do you see by 2020? 2020 is coming. What do you kind of see? I know, right? Even numbers.
I mean, technology makes a lot accessible, right? But to Richard's point, in the Caribbean, we talk about squatters, right? So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you're squatting on those platforms if you don't have your own native website, www.whatever.com. And with new technology, with podcasts, everything is, I see more people creating more communities or collaborating. So we see in the podcast space, podcast personalities collaborating to create a new show. There's opposing views, and I think you'll see more of that, because I feel like minority groups they don't have enough content, so you want to see more of that to represent the variety and the hybrid of views. And then just us here having conversation, it's always, you get more when you are bouncing off someone else as opposed to just sitting there talking to an audience, or just talking out there to whatever. So I see more, and I'm looking forward to more variety in podcasts. Audio drama is on the horizon for what I do, and Caribbean stories. Like, all these major podcasts are telling stories, and let's move away from the talking head also, or diversify and tell stories, because people connect with stories. Every day we tell a story. I go in the office, I tell a story about my kid, and everyone can relate to that story. Yeah, the son spilled this. So more stories that connect people, because I find a lot of times telling someone something is one thing, but when you relate a story, there's almost always a common experience in there somewhere, and it's just getting to, how do we get more people to hear those stories? So with technology, I think more podcasts, more other things that we've yet to discover. are happening, and with mergers with Spotify buying Gimlet and other Anchor might reveal interesting new things.
Melissa, what do you see happening for you by 2020?
Ooh, there's a lot happening, but I'm definitely expanding things in the television space where there will be a lot more focus, not just from the news perspective, but from the documentary and film perspective on stories out of the Caribbean region and diaspora. That's something I've been seeing a shift in that. I'm really excited about that. To actually have a voice in a space to work on those things, consult with some organizations and with some companies that are looking to do that. I'm really excited about that because it's challenging me. It's not necessarily journalism, but it's definitely in the media space. And I'm really excited about the collaborations when it comes to the tech side of that, as well as the film side, to learn, to grow, and to do more. And then outside of that, just in the digital space, working with some new outlets, ensuring that the coverage, their Caribbean coverage, is diversified. I think, as I mentioned before, beyond weather and crime, there's so many great stories, and tech is one of the big things. Business and tech in the Caribbean, I come across so many things daily, and I'd love to see more coverage of that. So I'm excited to be a part of actually moving that forward through my coverage.
And for you, 2020, what's going to happen? What do you see New York Times actually doing by 2020?
I can share some of what the New York Times should be doing. But I actually wanted to answer that question. I actually wanted to answer that question more from myself, what I'm trying to do by 2020 first. And it's really the same what you were talking about with sort of people are always finding those stories and artists for them. So like I personally, have been working in media now for almost 20 years or something like that. And often I have asked myself, and I know what the question is now, I couldn't phrase it before, 3 years ago. But often I'm asking, what is the other one of you here? And again, the New York Times is a company that is working really hard on the city, and our numbers are pretty good, but they're not what they're supposed to. So what I'm trying to work on this year is really engaging with the community, whether that is through journalism methods or not, but really finding an outlet to sort of bring the other Richard Pinales to the New Times. So like, I want to find the rest of the people who are like me and invite them in and see if we can sort of have more people of color in positions that actually matter. So that's my own personal plan. There's a lot of different things in the company where I can tap into those. This event is one of them. To try to see if I can sort of find that voice and find the way to really just help people figure out how to get into these big organizations. Now, from the New York Times perspective, we are getting ready for the election night, and so this is a big deal. From 2020. Yeah, from a technology perspective, it challenges everything that you do from resources and scaling out to be able to handle the type of traffic and the type of activities that you get on a night like that. So we have basically a trial last year with the interns. So we have a sense for where we're going, but we know that it's going to be a huge challenge to be ready for it from a technical perspective. So we don't start yet, but I'm sure there's a couple of teams already working on figuring out exactly how do we handle it, what is it financially, what is it from a technical perspective, and I suspect that I'll be involved in that very soon too.
Will you be using like AI to kind of just a question, I was wondering, you guys are playing around with
There's a bunch of data people here in the audience. They might be able to answer that, but
you're very giddy about it, I see.
yeah,
Is AI kind of like, especially if you're going to put it in the algorithm and say, hey, who might be the next president?
well, I don't know if we'll do that, but that's what it is. Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess the question would be, well, let's go back for a second. 2016, we found out now after the fact that Facebook was being utilized in such a way where, they were in a way compromised. And so 2020 is coming. What would you, and everyone can kind of, throw in their idea, but how would you prevent that whole thing happening again?
Facebook, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, that had to happen. It's that one thing where, there wouldn't be a cure for polio if there wasn't an issue with polio, right? So you kind of had, you know, you kind of needed that to happen because, you know, the unfortunate thing for me and the good thing for me, I worked in legal, so I understood when we were doing e-discovery, collecting data from people's computers, that my whole life, if something should happen, is discoverable. I'm scanning, I'm going through, queuing up databases for people to read it. And so I'm the one on Facebook telling my mom, don't post that, turn this off, turn off like Candy Crush and all of this stuff. And I think that had to happen for people to realize that it's not just this innocent thing. You have to be more mindful. You wouldn't just leave your social security card out there like that. That's what your data is. But because we talk about data and big data in such esoteric terms, people don't really understand the value of it, because with technology, value changes, and we aren't really educating people what the new value of the currency is. The currency is the data, because with the data, they don't have to guess what to sell you. They have that from your phone. They can do all of that. So that had to happen for people to get real about what's going to happen or what needs to happen or how to protect their data, the way that they would walk around the street, hey, it's my social security, hey, right? It's the same thing with data. It tells a lot about you. It predicts a lot about you. And without that incident, people would have still been doing God knows whatever and not aware, or blindly not updating their privacy settings, because when they started Facebook, whatever years ago, they never went back and changed their dorm room phone number or something like that. So it had to happen. I think it's unfortunate, but it had to.
That's a really good perspective on it. I think that we will be surprised about how much is sent from a data privacy perspective, from a security perspective, from a technology perspective. A lot of it is the same. So there is basically nothing stopping people from hacking Facebook and showing fake news. There is no way to stop that right now. What has happened since 2016 is that we have new regulations that are aiming at data privacy, and hopefully that's going to force companies to be more transparent. So a company like Facebook will have to be more transparent about who's buying ads on their systems. But I think bringing it back to any publication that wants to establish a relationship with users, you still have to play in that platform. You still have to have a presence. And so hopefully all the news outlets learn that they need to be real on those platforms, so that when you log in on November 2020, you know that you read something that came from the New York Times, and you can trust that it came from a reputable source versus everything else that was going on in 2016. But again, from what I've seen, there are some moves coming in that are going to help, but there is nothing stopping people from doing exactly what they did before. So I don't know if that's not what people want to hear, but I don't think technology has changed and the rules have not changed enough to prevent it. So
I definitely can agree with that nothing can necessarily stop it, but I think what it has done since 2016 is it's forced newsrooms to like we talked about earlier, kind of get in front of some of this fake news. Like, so we're fact checking in real time. We're counter, like if there's something happening and you're seeing the administration talking about something and it's actually, it's saying one, but it was two, that we're coming back at that like in real time. And that is something that is so necessary. And you would think that, in retrospect, we're like, oh, I think, I thought we knew that, but it's caused people to have more discernment. And I think that newsrooms have to continue to be in front of that in order to not to change everybody's minds, but at the same time, the more you do it, the more people are thinking about that stuff now. Like little things like make sure that it doesn't say, NewYorkTimes.com/ Skittles 99 or something like that, because those things will pop up and people would say, oh, it came from the Times, and if you just click on the actual link and you look at it, you know that this was from a source that is actually, pretending to be the New York Times, is not reputable, and is spreading false information. So that discernment, I think, got better at, but we have to continue to expand that, for sure.
What's oftentimes the most common misconception about what you guys do in your field?
Oh man. I think for me, because I'm someone who focuses on the Caribbean region, It's people think I literally pick up my suitcase and go to the beach every day. I do not, I promise you. And I'm like,
why not?
because there's a story when you get done, you know?
Not from the beach.
No, yeah, gotta be, no, it won't work out that way. I think the biggest challenge for me is having people understand that it's, yes, there are some fun things I get to do, and I really appreciate the fact that I get to be in that region, but it goes beyond covering weather and carnival. There's so much more to the nuances of the coverage, nuances of the people. There's a difference between English-speaking Caribbean, French-speaking Caribbean, Spanish-speaking Caribbean. There's different issues, different ethnicities, stories, religions, and sometimes those things don't come across. And I have to continuously explain, but I think that's part of why I'm really passionate about getting to do this, because I'm getting to share each and every time. So every time I get those questions or those kind of tidbits, I get to actually have a conversation and educate people about the region. And then also see more diversity in the stories that come out of it. And I'm really appreciative of that.
Okay. Misconception, podcast is not easy. It takes, I do, you know, some people outsource their editing. I don't, because I speak Patois and my guests speak Patois. I don't want someone who's not familiar with Patois to edit, because then you can lose some of the meaning. So it takes a lot of time, and even to the point where you talk about trust, right? Your audience trusts you to bring the relevant topics or subject matter to talk about, and you're not just blowing it off because you're tired. You're really thinking about talking about or addressing an issue that means something to the audience. So it's not full-on journalism the way New York Times or Melissa does it, but it's a lot of planning and thinking and bouncing ideas of what we should address and getting feedback. And so that in itself is a very long process before you actually hit the mic to record, and then editing is a whole other process. So it does take time to present quality information that resonates with people.
The biggest misconceptions about what I do, I think it's three of them. I don't make newspapers. My kids think that I do. This one is I don't fix computers. My family thinks that I do that. And the last one is this whole thing about, you know, the actual stories that are in the New York Times. Like, I don't write any of them. So like a lot of people who know I work here always ask me, oh, you wrote this person, that person. I'm like, not really. So there's that misconception of exactly how embedded in the newsroom anybody in technology really is. People just playing to outsiders, but I'm not in the newsroom.
But you're just as important, though.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, if you were to look at how many people, if you had the numbers on how many people actually use their devices to go to the New York Times articles
Per day.
per day.
Let me see, I don't think I know offhand the number of people, but I know that we get, I think we get about 30 million page views per day on the web, I think. I don't know, so apps might be a different number. So we have a pretty decent audience. So there are people that might actually know these numbers.
Who knows that?
I'm pretty sure that we get so we collect data based on what we know about users. So we collect data about our subscribers, about our registered users, and about our anonymous users. I believe we get about 10 million cookies. I want to say per day, but this guys can correct me on that one. But that basically means 10 million sort of clusters that we did see yesterday.
Do you feel like the audience for all of you, is your audience older, younger? Let's say are many now millennials, or maybe slightly older, maybe slightly younger?
I would say it's been a mixture, and I see it vary between the stuff I do for digital and things I do for television. But what I have found is that when I do collaborative projects and we're bringing in different groups or different, like let's say personalities or people working on it, then we see that mixture either go up or go down. But I definitely think it's a mixture. And millennials definitely play a big role in sharing the content. They're really excited about like either reposting, retweeting, sharing, you know, and you have to join and check out this person, and that's really helpful across different social media platforms. And then I would say from the television side, we get a lot more folks who want to sit down and still watch their evening newscast, and you really want to you know, tap into that audience as well. So that's really important on both ends.
Definitely a mix. Anytime the age group, if I see anything further down in the 60 category, I'm like, oh, that's my mom. Yeah. No, but she plays a huge role in sharing with her friends, especially since I'm not on Facebook a lot. So when I see a lot of that traffic, I know that and the numbers supported a more of the older group of people may stay on Facebook versus the younger ones on Twitter and Instagram. And so I find that it's a mix again because there's not enough content that, you know, maybe my mom's age group, and I know this, they want to hear something else versus my age group and younger. But if it's the only source or one of few sources, they'll consume it and support it. So yeah, it's a mix of audience.
We have a mix as well. I mean, we have a global audience. We seem to attract a lot of college graduates to the New Times that come to us and stay with us. But we've been around for so long that some people read it out of habit because their parents read it, you know, at home. So that we have a pretty we have a pretty wide net of demographics. We have different ways of kind of put the types of users that visit us beyond sort of the age groups. Cool.
Well, I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. That was fast. Raise your hands. I'll come to you.
Thank you. Good. I wanted to ask, so you were talking about decision making within the newsroom based on data. I think you were talking about like the way to cover stories based on data and what to cover based on data. I wanted to ask from the journalist perspective about data and storytelling. How do you bring data into the stories? How do you, because you're not a data journalist, how does it drive the storytelling, or are there opportunities you've seen to get your stories into the newsroom because of the trends or because they want to get analytics on the groups that you cover? Also to mention, data also is important in terms of driving like solutions, this whole solutions journalism. We know we have a lot of problems in the Caribbean, so does that impact your storytelling?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I would say it definitely does. There's been times where the data is actually what brought the story idea together in the first place. And I think this is a great point to bring up, like the fact that it's such a collaborative effort. It's something that I do that I don't work with a team on, and I always like want to make that paramount. Like you have the data person that's really helping you to illustrate what that's going to look like. It's one thing to just say, 1 out of 10 people were, let's say, incarcerated last year, something like that. But then when you have someone that can actually, like, not just quantify that, but bring it to life through graphics and show people like those that for them to see it is something different. Also, when it comes to just sometimes that data is what actually creates the discussion that then, you see the statistics, but then you find the story. Like you find the person that represents that, staff that's been impacted by that. And that's how I follow the story. I'm able to find it and report it out. So that does play a big role. And I would say in terms of collaboration, it's people who are analyzing the data that you work with across your newsroom that will sometimes bring those things to your attention. Or I'll go to them and say, hey, I've been seeing this. Can we talk about that a little bit more? And we'll collaborate and come up with an idea based on that. So the team here, no matter what side you work on, I think that collaboration is imperative because there's no way that I can do what I do without what they do either. So that's been a big thing. And to your point about the Caribbean in particular, one thing that's been very, very difficult is gathering data. Certain things, particularly, I've done a lot of mental health coverage in the Caribbean, as well as migration and immigration coverage. And one of the hardest things has been to get data that is, across the board when it comes, either country by country or across the board on certain things. So then, instead of being able to quantify certain things, I'll have to go to my data team and say, hey, we'll have to show this qualitative. We'll have to tell certain stories and then use, let's say Jamaica as an example of X, or, you Diana as the example of why, and through their work and their understanding, we're able to show people that, hey, this is a problem here, even though we can't necessarily say 1 in 10. So it's been extremely important to have, that close collaboration with the newsroom. They make my job so much easier.
Hi, this is Reid-Brown with the New York Times. I have a question. I'm not sure if it's proprietary. I do content marketing, and because I've always used analytics to really sort of drive all of the storytelling in my reporting. So when I think about 2020 in the future and what's exciting to me, and I think about the New York Times and the vast amount of historical data, does the New York Times use blockchain for content, or is the New York Times looking to eventually use blockchain to store historical data and even pushing out in the future?
That's a really good question. The short answer is we're not doing anything in blockchain right now. I think as part of the data team, we have never really talked about it in those terms. There is still a lot of basic stuff from a data platform perspective that needs attention and needs to be worked out. So we do have teams of data scientists who are looking into what kind of algorithms and what kind of data collection methodologies we can use to get ahead of the curve. But we haven't made any jump to blockchain or really I mentioned AI before, but there is no AI used in the newsroom. Right? We have some parts of the web recommendation algorithm is based on the attributes of the content. So that's really light touch personalization. Blockchain is a super interesting thing, but it's the latest buzzword. So we're definitely going to be looking at it from an engineering perspective at some point in the data group, but I don't see us sort of prioritizing that right now. We still have what I like to call just basic data platform type work that just needs to be done. And it takes time and resources, of course.
Hi, thanks for this panel. It was very informative. So my name is Janie, and I help run the audience development team at the New York Daily News. We're a very small team, and we're very young. It's like 3 people. We don't have a lot of bandwidth to cover bodies just for homepage and social. So at the Times or other places, how do you determine what areas you should be putting your time into and looking into, like Facebook instant articles, or this is our Twitter strategy, and this is Instagram stories? So how do you determine what areas with a bare bones team you should be learning from, and how much time do you give that to get some success?
That's a really good question. So all of those are off-platform type of sort of destinations for your users. At the Times, we're lucky enough to have enough resources to sort of line up our analyst team to sort of look into this platform. And what we did was basically try to figure out what does it mean for us to put our content in Facebook Instant or Google Amp, and what does that mean from our audience perspective? And so we did a lot of work. I think you're seeing the back here, some of that work, to try to figure out what does that mean for our audience, what are the risks, right? And based on that, we use decisions that would say they are slightly more platform. Now we had the resources to put an analytics team behind that. My team worked on thinking through data collection and how do you identify people off your platform. Now, if you have it at a small scale, you need to make some decisions about that. I always say to anybody working in data, especially from a collection perspective, go with the tools that already do what you're trying. Don't build that custom thing. Don't, unless you're trying to compete in that space, don't put too many resources, right? So if you want to know sort of how much you build out so it can show up on Google App, then you have an engineer and analyst sort of look into that, create the things that go into that. But from an analyst perspective, maybe you get a default analyst that comes to the platform as opposed to doing something for it. Again, I think that at some point it doesn't pay to create custom analytics solutions for some of the things that we do. So in a small team, we got to make that calculation and determine that we can use off the shelf product.
It's called being agile.
It's a project management term. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Phil. I'm an aspired journalist. So I have a question for all of you. Not only so I can field any questions. But, there was some situation that happened with a journalist by the name of Jamal Khashoggi. And I kind of wanted to know, just like as far as like journalism landscape, like what type of effect does that have in regards to that? And I have another question.
I mean, so I remember my friend, I mean, I am not going out and I don't have a country, you know, upset with me for whatever reason, but when you hear that news, you have immediate reaction from your family members to be careful of what you say because they're immediately concerned about your well-being. They don't want you to be attacked. And then you have to think of, you know, in that moment, I need to tell a story. I need to make sure that my kids hear a story that they may not hear anywhere else. And you do think about it when you're, you know, having certain conversations, how political you want to go or how far left, but then you think about what does my audience expect from me? Because there's a trust. They trust you with 30 minutes of their time. And how do you share that story in a way that invites dialogue, right? So I think the difference between, you know, Jamaica is not coming from me or any one of the CARICOM countries, but, you know, with trolling and everything that it is, you often are concerned that, you know, all of a sudden you're trending on Twitter because somebody drags you for saying something on a podcast or something. So you think about it, but I don't let it get in the way because then you're taking something away from a larger community based on the actions of one or a few.
I think for me, I have several colleagues who work at the Washington Post and did work closely on that team, and with that really terrible situation, it was something that started with me. It was very, I think it made it real that we're in an age now where journalists being attacked for simply doing their job is something that I never really thought I would worry about as an American journalist, at least while, you know, reporting on a regular basis here. And then, you know, we have our safety measures that we put in place, or we have to get training and things like that when we go abroad. But it never really hit that close to home for me until, not that things haven't happened before, because there's definitely been things that have given me pause, but that was something that, and the way the situation played out with the administration as well, it gave me pause and it made me think about not only what it means to do this job every day, but then what it means in terms of how people react to it. I think seeing how the Washington Post reporters really took that head on in not only remembrance, but of their colleagues, but also to really get the facts out there and really do some dogged reporting was something that I said, could I have done that? You know, being that I'm grieving at the same time that I'm trying to report, and I really applauded them for that. But I think, again, back to Kerry-Ann's point, it makes you say that as much as you sometimes might be fearful or are given pause for certain things that happen, you still want to deliver those stories that if you don't tell them, sometimes you really have to wonder who else will. So I think for a lot of people, it's a matter of making sure that the story is getting out there versus letting, you know, your own fears stop you. So I think that's something that I'll continue to think about, but at the same time, want to make sure that my audience is getting those stories.
Cool. Any other questions?
One more.
Oh, part two. Yeah.
Part two. Sorry, that's part two.
Yeah. Not only the mic, you can hear me. Okay.
If you could just stand up so we can hear you a little bit better.
Yeah, 'cause, I think it's like a topic that kind of like connects, like the Caribbean ethnicities, or like just ethnicities, like specifically as far how like information trickles down from just from case studies, research to journalism to Twitter to people, consumers. Like how do you guys deal with that?
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, like hypothetically, like if like someone does a research study that says that like microwaves kill people, and then like a month later, like that goes through like its own process, and it gets out to people, and then like within that whole process, like they do new research, like oh no, microwaves don't.
You mean in terms of if someone comes back to me and says, okay, you did this story, but now we're seeing this? I just want to be sure that I'm answering your question.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, so that's something that as a reporter I deal with all the time. You know, you could have reported on something 5 months ago, and you know, you have all your rights and clearances, you did your due diligence, you fact check, everything is on point, and someone will come back and say they didn't like the way that you know, they were quoted, and although it's factual, there's no errors in it, this is what they said, and they're well within their rights to not like it, but it doesn't mean that we're going to change it because they don't like what was said, because as long as it's factual, there's no errors in it, it's going to remain that way more than likely. So that's something that, in terms of just kind of having that thick skin and knowing that you have what you need to back yourself up. So I make it a point to do simple things like recording my interviews, whether they're whether it's the audio or it's video, making sure I have that permission from my subjects. And then, especially when it comes to video, I have my release form. So if anything happens and it means this happens to me last week, they say, hey, here was the permissions right here, this is what you said, this is factual. So, you know, it's unfortunate the person may not like it, but it doesn't change the fact. And then with new information, that's just part of reporting. So if new information is coming out about something, then that's an update story, and that's perfectly fine. Because at the time that the story was done, that is what was factual. Now we have new information brought to light, and we have to update that as needed.
You have a question?
We're going to know more questions. He actually works with me. If anybody needs a website or apps developed, Malcolm's the man.
I didn't say that. So to kind of piggyback on that, one of the issues that I have with online journalism primarily is the use of social media and how closely you guys are tied to social media. Namely, I see a lot of articles where there's like a 2-paragraph summary and the rest of the articles is just tweets. Right? And then this kind of ties into what he's asking about is when you take the Jussie Smollett case, when you have information that comes out, everybody jumps on it. How are you guys, you know, I don't know if the New York Times doesn't ask much or whatnot, but what is the process of, you know, making sure that you know that social media steer the direction of the story rather than reporting just the facts?
That's a really good question. So I think that it comes back to establishing your brand and the trust, right? So, and again, I'm not suggesting that we do it perfectly, but we try to stay away from the few cat stories and things of that nature. We're not looking for clicks, right? So we're trying to put out the news. And so like, if we have managed to establish that relationship on social media with the users, hopefully the trust is built there. And what I think what we're trying to do is invite you back to the New York Times, right? And so if you get to a story on the New York Times that was a sensitive matter, you probably won't see any ads about anything that's not, you know, that would be questionable. We have a lot of people in place to make sure that when you start to get tagged with certain sort of subject matters and certain levels of sensitivity, sometimes we don't even put ads on them. To make sure that we don't get into a situation where we're talking about something really serious and then you see a picture or something. And so, you know, I think for other news outlets, is this, you know, I think that people need to be mindful of, you know, how much do you go for the click and the audience, and how much are you trying to tell the story, especially when it is off your platform. Because on your platform, you can control that. You can turn ads off, you can attract people, whatever you decide to do. But on social media, it's a free for, especially on the commenting part. So usually there's just a summary you're talking about, and somebody's going to come into that conversation and write some outrageous thing. And sometimes they will even question the source or question you as a publisher. So I know that here at the Times, we actually have training for to notice I was at one of those meetings where they announced this. We had training where anybody who publishes stories on social media is getting information about how do you respond to comments. You know, which comments do you respond to? Like, we don't only respond to people who agree with us, we gotta respond to everyone as much as we can. And so each journalist is instructed to sort of follow a particular set of guidelines and making sure that we're telling stories that sort of align with the truth and also with the values of this company. Again, that doesn't make it perfect because you still have trolling going on social media. You still have people who copy and paste the summary and add more to it or change an image or whatever it is. But I really, for me, it begins with trust and really sort of having that clarity of what is the exchange between you and whoever published this information. Like, you know, they want to give you a little summary, and hopefully they invite you to go to their platform to get the rest of it, and hopefully you have a relationship with the trust with the
For me, it's been a mixture because I work between like network level news outlets and smaller ones that have much smaller teams. And I think what's been, to your point, I've had to do those trainings where we have to learn, you know, how to respond to both sides, when not to respond, and also just having that discernment. Like in the case of the Justice Smollett story, it was not just jumping onto our social media platforms immediately before verifying certain key aspects of the story for ourselves. And then even when we did verify certain things, it was just posting the facts that we had, and nothing beyond that. You know, the free-for-all will happen in comments. There's like really nothing we're able to do about that. But I find that sometimes people say, well, Melissa, why aren't you commenting now? It's really quiet. I'm not being quiet. I'm observing, I'm gathering facts first. And more than likely, I'm working on socials or, you know, whatever respective news outlets. I'm making sure that that's done first, that's done equitably, that's done right. And then if I so choose to do it personally and make a comment about it, then that's different. But many times it's much later because I'm just focused on making sure the news outlet stuff is done properly. And I might jump, you know, come in afterwards. But then sometimes I'll just sit back. If this is something that unfolded in a way I could have never expected. And I think it's a little teachable moment because a lot of things were, people jumped on it, there was a story about it. There's a news story saying, oh no, and it's retracting this and bringing it back. That was a lot. So I personally stayed away from it, but from the news perspective, we've just been really careful about fact checking and only sharing with what we have verified. But it's difficult. It is very difficult, I will not lie.
So as a general rule, I don't post anything news related. I stay away from it. Just because there are other platforms that do that, I don't report the news real time. And for any comments on the platform, I remember we posted an article, 13 women of Caribbean heritage and politics you should know, and someone posted, oh, you don't have any Republicans on here. I'm like, thanks for the feedback. And that's it. It was always, I didn't want to start like a debate. It was just, that was a good feedback. The reality is most Caribbean politicians are not Republicans. So if I didn't list them, it wasn't excluding somebody. It was just because that's usually what it is. And just say, thanks for the feedback. It was a good feedback. Maybe someone will consider, being a Republican, but I try not to engage at all.
Well, guys, Kerry-Ann, Melissa, Richard, thank you so much. I really we do have a little contest. We have a pizza at least two, but then there's no match. And also, we're going to head down to the 13th floor.
So we can stay here for a bit, and if people do want, there is a little bit of pizza left. If you do want, we can take a group.
Because you wanted that pizza.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we can stay here at network. If you have more questions, feel free to ask. Some of us here are also for the time, so we want to learn about what we're doing here. You can ask us. And if anybody's interested in pizza, we can take possession.
Thank you again to your time, sir. Thank you, Last time you